Welcome, everyone. My name's Peter Manuelian. I'm delighted at this turnout and also to welcome not only those of you in the audience, but those of us who are watching on Facebook Live. We are live streaming this event, and it's the first of 3 such lectures that we'll be having this semester. So if you want to break out your calendars, the other 2 Egyptology lectures are October 12th and November 14th. That's Thursday, October 12th, and Tuesday, November 14th. And the next one coming up after this is a lecture by Salima Ikram, the Distinguished University Professor at the American University in Cairo, and she'll present on the diversity of animal mummies in ancient Egypt and their significance in shaping perceptions of ancient Egypt. And I invite you to stop by at the table over to the right and pick up a copy of all of the Harvard Museums of Science and Culture programs going on this semester and this year. We've got an awful lot packed into the academic year for you, and I know you won't want to miss those. So we're delighted and very happy to be able to welcome our speaker this evening. Dr. Ramadan Hussein is currently the director of the Saqqara Saite Tombs Project at the Institute of Near Eastern Studies at the Eberhard Karls Universität in Tübingen, Germany. He first studied Egyptology at Cairo University from 1990 to 1994, and then worked as inspector of antiquities at Giza and Saqqara for 7 years. It was during this time that he received his training in archaeology, and he participated in the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities excavations at Giza, Saqqara, and Bahreya Oasis. He was admitted to the PhD program at Brown University from 2001 to 2009, where his MA and PhD research focused on the ancient Egyptian language and religious texts. And during his time in Providence, he also taught classes on Egyptian history and language and the ancient cultures of the Nile Valley, not only for the Department of Egyptology at Brown, but also for the Anthropology Department at Rhode Island College. From 2003 to 2006, he joined the Brown University Cairo University expedition at the so-called Abu Bakr Cemetery at Giza. That's west of the Great Pyramid. On this project, he was first an area supervisor and later a deputy director. Dr. Hussein returned from the Ministry of Antiquities. He returned to the Ministry of Antiquities in June 2009, and he was put in charge of the Center of Documentation and Study of Egyptian Antiquities. He was also appointed as managing editor of the Publications Department, and finally, the Chief of Staff to the Minister of Antiquities himself in April 2011. His current research interest is focused on the processes and composition and transmission of ancient Egyptian religious texts. In 2013, he was awarded the prestigious Alexander von Humboldt Fellowship, Research Fellowship, and that allowed him to spend 2 years at the University of Tübingen in Germany. After that, he was awarded the University of Tübingen Excellence Initiative Fellowship for 6 months, and then a much larger grant from the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft in 2016 for his ongoing research. Most recently, as a co-applicant, he received a 5-year research grant. We can only dream of those over here. A 5-year research grant from the Netherlands Organization for Scientific Research to work on the rituals and the transmission of religious texts in the New Kingdom in the tombs at Saqqara. This project will be based at the University of Leiden in the Netherlands. And somehow in between all of this work, he found the time to help the Giza project right here in Boston. In a project that he tells me remains closest to his heart, he single-handedly translated into English about 40 recently rediscovered Arabic excavation diary books from the Harvard University Boston Museum of Fine Arts expedition to Giza. These were written between 1913 and 1947 by the Egyptian foremen working under our own George Reisner. Today, Dr. Hussein heads south of Giza to take us, as you can see here, inside the tombs of Saqqara, the ancient Egyptian burial site revealed. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Hussein.
I have to turn this thing. So, thank you so much. Thank you, Peter, for this invitation. I'm so honored to be invited to speak in such a prestigious institute. There is no football rivalry today. So tonight, I would like to speak to you about our project in Saqqara we are working, we meaning a team from the University of Tübingen and an Egyptian team also from the Ministry of Antiquities and some from the University of Cairo And we are working in Saqqara in a site that is around the pyramid of King Unas, the last king of Dynasty 5. The tombs that is clustered around this pyramid belong to Dynasty 26, which we all know as the Saite tomb. We're talking about 7th century BC Egypt. During that particular time of history, the ancient Near East was witnessing a complete change of the geopolitical system, with the demise of Egypt and the Hittites losing their territories and empire to new rising powers in the ancient Near East, that is the Persians and the Greeks. However, in the midst of all this demise and decline of Egyptian civilization, there was a patriotic dynasty that is formed by nationalistic Egyptians who wanted to bring the glory of Egypt, the glorious days of Egypt back. And they fostered, not really started, they fostered a movement of archaism, that is nostalgia toward everything that was glorious in Egyptian history and civilization. They focus on reviving artistic trends and literature, in particular, religious literature. So this is a time of history, of Egyptian history, for everybody who's interested in text to see how texts were transmitted from one place to another through space and time. But this is not going to be the focus of my research tonight. Our presentation tonight is on these tombs and how we discovered and rediscovered them. We started the project believing that Egypt, right this minute, needs a second round of epigraphical and excavation missions, meaning we don't need to discover new sites, but we can go back to the old sites that has been discovered and excavated 150 years ago, 120 years ago, and re-excavate these sites with the new understanding or the modern understanding of Egyptology and the modern technique of excavation and recording right now. That was one of the major things that brought me back to Saqqara to re-excavate what we know them as the shaft tombs of Dynasty 26. So Dynasty 26 tombs are the major cluster, or the most tombs are clustered around the pyramid of King Unas, right here. You can see around in this site to the south and east of the pyramid of King Unas, Maspru sent his assistant to work in the site, and they discovered about 6 tombs in this area. One of them is Chanehibu, Psamtik, Padinisit, and the missing this tomb. And then to the east of the pyramid of Unas, they discovered Padinit, Hekam Saf, and in 1950s, an Egyptian came to continue the work of Reisner from 1899, and he discovered the main shaft of Amun Tifnacht. Very close to the pyramid of King Userkaf of Dynasty 5, we have 2 tombs from Dynasty 26 for Hiru'a and for Nefer-e Prasanit, and around the pyramid of King Titi as well. There's 2 tombs that Lepsius, the German explorer, has documented them, but we don't have them at the moment. And the Egyptian Antiquities Service re-excavated a site or a tomb for Ujahur in the causeway of King Unas. And then there is the missing Psamtik right here. So these tombs we already know where they are. Some of them are missing, but we know what's in these tombs. So we went back with the purpose of doing a thorough documentation of these tombs and a thorough publication of them. So since we all know them since 1899, the Italians were the first people to really show some interest in the publication of these tombs. They went to the tombs of Psamtik, Padinis, Chanehibu, and that was in 1979. They produced the first monograph, the first and the last monograph, and they left these tombs and shifted their attention to the much bigger monumental tomb of Pak and Renef that also dates to Dynasty 26, and this tomb has not yet to be published fully. So they were left until 2016. I had my eyes on these tombs since I was writing my dissertation because the corpus of the data came from this tomb in terms of their text. So when I went to Tübingen, I had asked to put an application for a major grant to re-excavate these tombs and document and publish them. The first phase of our project focusing on the tomb of Psamtik, Padi Nisit, and the tomb of Amun Tefnacht. The selection was made based on the volume of the text that is in these three tombs. The next phase of the project, hopefully we're going to be working on Hikam Saf, Padi Nit, and possibly correct mistakes in Chanahibu's publication. But it looks like we're going to include something else in the second phase, just to get you oriented as to what these shaft tombs looks like. They, typologically speaking, they consist of a major shaft. This is sometimes 8 by 8 meters, and it goes down to about 25 to 30 meters. And this is just to give you an indication how deep these main shafts are. This picture was taken from the ceiling. We stood on top of the ceiling of the burial chamber of Amun Tefnacht. So it's about 30 meters deep, completely emptied, and then the burial chamber will be built in the bottom of this shaft and everything backfilled again. For every main shaft, there is a side shaft or 3. Like in the tomb of Amun Tefnacht, there's 3 side shafts that all lead into an antechamber, then a corridor that leads to the burial chamber. Most of the burial chambers are like this one for Padi Nisit, and it has a vaulted ceiling and it looks exactly like a sarcophagus. That's why I would like to call them the sarcophagus tombs for so many reasons. The shape, and they're following a tradition of the Middle Kingdom of distributing text based on the relationship between the text and the body of the deceased. So the first tomb that we started working on in 2016, what the tomb belongs to a person by the name Padi Nisit. This is how the burial chamber looked in March 2016. Padi Nisit was one of the highest ranking officials by the end of Dynasty 26, specifically the time of King Amaziz, the last king of Dynasty 26, and during the time of this king, Egypt fell again to the Persian occupation. Padi Nisit, his titles relate him mostly to the royal palace. He was one of the officials working in the royal palace, and the title that turns up a lot in his inscription is that he was the director of the storage department in the royal palace. So many other titles, we're going to see them momentarily. The sarcophagus of Padi Nisit was taken out of the tomb in 1899 and was moved to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, and it is anthropoid sarcophagus with this lots of text on it, and we're going to go back to it. Some of the stuff that was found by Maspru and his assistants in the tomb of Padi Nisit is the canopic jars, this set of 4 canopic jars, which contains the organs of the deceased during the embalming process, and we're going to hear the word embalming a lot tonight. And some of the other things that were found with him is these golden fingertips and other amulets. Those are all went to the Egyptian Museum, and luckily for us, they are moving to the Grand Egyptian Museum, the new one that will be opened shortly. Luckily, because every object that is moving to this museum had to be fully documented, meaning photographed, good photography, and collect information and data about it. So we get access to this material from the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. Padi Nisit, as I said, he held a number of titles that are all connecting him to the royal palace, specifically the overseer or the director of the storage department. And to myself, I'm very interested to know about this series of 3 titles he had. He was the priest of the Amis, that is the Amis mace head, and he was the overseer or the great one of the box of valuables, and he was also secretary of the royal linen. They're particularly interesting because we can see the impact of those particular titles on the composition of his text. He put into his composition a number of spells that only do with royal regalia and royal weapons. Those particular texts appeared in the pyramid of Queen Neat, the last queen of Dynasty 6, and they disappear until they turn up in the first intermediate period with King Achtoy. and then we don't see them anymore. But we see them for the first time and the last time with Padinisit, possibly because he was a priest of a very sacred weapon that is used by the king. So he possibly had access to this particular text. So one important goal we had in mind is to produce a good survey map of the site that we are working on that is around the pyramid of King Unas. Saqqara is very well known. However, there is not a good survey map for Saqqara. There was a project by the Scotland's museums to produce a survey map, but they really put some good points and anchors for further projects. So one of the biggest things in challenges for me was to find exactly if this area has been ever surveyed and we can use the maps for, that was produced by other colleagues, but it turned out there is none. Even the French who worked around the pyramid of Unas produced no survey map. They mapped the area, but not really according to total station kind of satellite things. So even in the Porter Moss and Jeff Spencer's maps, all the area that we're working on, you see that they're referring to our tombs, just small little dots and with no actual coordinates. So we were very lucky that we kept looking for datum control points to start our survey project. We knew that Cairo University in 1979 has put some points on top, one point on top of the pyramid of King Unas, and it called it T7. We had the coordinates from Cairo University and the Egyptian Inspectorate, and we started to take our derivatives from it. We had 2 points that will be our points, survey points, and believe me, this is not my naming of these points. My survey insisted to name them this way. So we established our grid, and we left 2 sets of grids behind us in the southwest, and we are working on the 3rd set. We left the 4th set in the northeast for any further projects either conducted by us or by other missions. So one of the goals that we have also is to re-clear the shafts of Padinisit, but not fully reclaim, partial clearance. On top of the main shaft, there was this mound, which we did not know where it came from. There is a shaft right next to it that was partially excavated by the Egyptian Inspectorate, but never really finished it. So it was a big puzzle for us, where this mound coming from. So we dealt with it, and we had to decide quickly what to do with it. So we experimented with excavation technique that is called quadrant trench technique. We excavate 2 opposite trenches at the same time, which will give us the opportunity to look at 4 profiles simultaneously, and then can record whatever we find. If there is any valuable objects that we have to record, we clearly have to stop and do it, but luckily there was nothing to be recorded in this mound, means it was backfill that came from somewhere else with no any important archaeological data. So we left it, and we moved a little bit to the south, and we found the first indication of a floor that is built of slabs of limestone, a local Saqqara limestone that is of poor quality. We continued with this particular floor, and we found out that it is a platform that is on top of the site, the southern side of the main shaft of Padinisit. The soil deposit on this platform, in some areas was about 60 centimeters high, and in other areas about 15 centimeters thick. Important thing about the deposit is what we were able to recover, which is charcoal, botanical remains, some animal bones, seashells. Those are indication of human activities taking place on top of this platform, particularly the charcoal. The charcoal is an indication of burning. Burning and food, those are indication for presentations of offering. So clearly now we have an idea what was going on this platform. The other thing, when we start continue excavating, the platform turned out to be made of 3 courses, the ones that remain, three courses of local limestone, and there are evidence for massive walls. This particular one in the north is about 2.5 meter wide, and also indication for similar massive walls on the west and the east. So we got now an idea about the superstructure that hasn't been recorded by Maspero and his assistant. It's massive walls around these main shafts, because there was always a debate what was on top of this huge shaft, whether it was a mastaba tomb or a pyramid on top of them, or just left open with nothing on top of them. But now we can say, yes, there is a superstructure that is, in all intents and purposes, it was about massive walls around it. And behind this platform to the south, we started to discover evidence of a chapel on top of the side shaft of Padinisit. Particularly this area right here, where we have a wall and another wall right here. It looks like they're flanking an entrance to a very important and a focal point of activities in this chapel. This particular 2 stones on the highest elevation in the chapel and on the west. Those are very good indication for an offering or an altar, or offering table or an altar. For any Egyptologist who would look at these 2 stones, they form the word hetep, which means offering, and this is how the offering tables look like in ancient Egypt. More important, what was on top of this particular offering table? A thick layer of ashes and botanical remains, charcoal. The remains, the botanical remains are burnt, the bones are burnt, and also charcoal. So those are indication of activities of burning and presentation of offerings on top of this particular altar. So now we can say, yes, the superstructure of these shafts is massive walls, a platform where rituals be performed, and a chapel on top of the side shaft. Maspero, when he was clearing the main shaft of Padinisit, found this ostracon for King Ramses II. And it looks like in Dynasty 26, in the backfilling process, they would collect whatever they find in the area and dump it in the main shaft. When Maspero backfilled this shaft after cleaning it, he also was collecting everything in the area and dumping it in. And one of the things that we found 35 small fragments of limestone with hieroglyphic inscription. The most important of them is this one that mentions the word wasit, and then another one that has the remains of the cartouche of King Ramses II. So Ramses II and wasit, and we are around the Pyramid of Unas. We have to think of this particular side of the Pyramid of Unas, that is the southern side of Unas, where Chaim Wasit, the prince, the restorer, the first Egyptologist in human history, came to the site, did his conservation project in the Pyramid of Unas, and left his inscription right there. One important thing is that the size of the fragments we found is much more smaller than the size of the hieroglyphs that are in place right now. So if you go back, those hieroglyphs are much bigger than the hieroglyphs we have found. Speaking of visualities and materiality of text, bigger signs when they're in a far distance, when you look far, the signs has to be big. The closer you get to the ground level, the signs get smaller. That tells me that the fragments we found are actually coming from courses very close to the ground level. So there is a text that we are missing right now, and we have some of it that we recovered during our work. By the end of our first season, that was the situation when we left the site. A main shaft of Padinisit partially cleared, with indication of or evidence for massive walls around it, a chapel, and an altar, and surprises always happen at the end of the season, and I'll come to this one shortly. But there are other tombs that can confirm our excavation, our findings. In the tomb of Jahur, there is walls around the main shaft, and that particular ledge, you see it again in Abu Sir. Abu Sir, there's also evidence for massive walls around the main shaft and a mud brick ledge as well. It looks like it became important component to have a ledge where rituals will be performed right on top of the shaft. The other tomb that we worked on this following season belonged to Psamtik, who possibly was the father of Padinisit. And Psamtik was a chief physician and the leader of the Libyan, or commander of the Libyan mercenaries. His main shaft is right next to the shaft of Padinisit in this area. It was also backfilled. We started clearing the main shaft of Padinisit, and you see these huge boulders that were dumped back into this shaft. One of the reasons that we wanted to really partially clean these shafts is to reduce the weight and the pressure on top of the ceilings of all the burial chambers down below. It's about 30 meters deep, and the shaft is completely backfilled with these boulders. That caused major cracks in these burial chambers. So for conservation purposes, we had to re-clear this shaft at least partially. And those guys can move anything. So one of the things we found is this wall between the main shaft of Padinisit and the shaft of Psamtik. This wall, as you can see, was built pretty much with whatever was available in terms of building material on the site, not really expensive ashlar, but also some spolia were used, that is, inscribed stones from older building were used in the construction of this particular wall that is between Padinisit and Psamtik. Maspru and his assistant were always very generous to leave behind some cachet, some stuff for anybody who's gonna come in the future and work. And this is some of the pottery that was left behind inside the main shaft of Psamtik, and it's all Dynasty 26 pottery. And some of the other stuff that was found is this basket and some of the sandals. And we have one of our conservators. She is fantastic, and she knows everything about handcraft and things. She showed interest in producing a study on the weaving technique of these sandals. And I hope that her report will be ready very shortly to be published. Some of the things that we found in the main shaft of Padinisit was those mummified scarabs that will be put with the mummies. But as I said, surprises always come at the end of the season. What we found by the end of the first season was this shaft with some of the holes were used as bases for jars. And this shaft is led to by a ramp. And this is very important because Reisner was always finding in Giza, behind the mastabas, ramps that goes back to the top of the shafts, and on top of the shafts he would find deposits of pottery. It looks like there is actual ritual being performed on top of the shafts, the burial shafts, and there is a textual evidence for it that is calling about offerings made for him on top of his shaft. So I was happy. I am on top of Dynasty 26 side shaft. Possibly I'm going to discover Dynasty 26 tomb. We closed the site, and the next season the following season we started working. And just 50 centimeters deep, we found the first context, which is pottery jars. I hope you can make out this one, filled with soiled linen and botanical remain. So going down this shaft, almost every 25 centimeters, there is a context with pottery, specifically cooking ware. Those are pots used for cooking, and all of them will be packed with botanical remains and soiled linen. Until we found about 1.5 meters deep, or 2 meters, we found a dog burial with a cooking jar. As you can see, the blackening on this cooking jar, stuffed also with botanical remain, and also in this time there is sheepskin in the packing or in the stuffing. The dog was treated very well in terms of the burial. It was put on a platform made of limestone. And we paid attention to this botanical remains. And we had my friend Dr. Salima Ikram to visit us. And we looked at the dog burial. And one of the things that, as you can see, that the burial was treated with care. The head was at the west, facing south. The head is a lower level than the rest of the body. The belly area is filled with fly larvae. This is an indication that the dog was left out after its death in the open air for a little bit before the burial. Dog is devoid of flesh. Its fur is preserved in places, particularly the tail and the head. It's yellow and brown hair. All bones are present, no evidence of death or cause of death. All bones fused, and she gave it between 4 and 7 years old. Why we have a dog? I was like, okay, this is the point of my excavation when I said, this cannot be a tomb. This has to be something else. So we had to look at the botanical remains that were in the stuffing, that were used as stuffing material, and this cooking ware with the blackening evidence on them. I was surprised by the dog. Then the following stratum showed palmetto bugs, about 6 of them, and red linen, soiled, and white linen, soiled as well. So the red linen, it's a small piece of linen, as you can see, with this white band and 3 sledges right there that we can, through them, really know the actual size of this one. We have, I made contact with Dr. Nicole Reithardt from University of Trier in Germany, and we are going to investigate this particular piece of linen. Particularly, we would like to do residue analysis for the discoloration, the brown discoloration in this area, because this is an indication of use of some oil of some sort. At this point, I had to say, okay, there is linen soiled, there's packing material, there's everything that says there's embalming happening in this situation. So, and some of the stuffing with the botanical remains that we found, I called upon my colleague, Dr. Minna Dori. She is a graduate of the program, a doctoral program of the University of Munster, and she is our archaeobotanist. She did her preliminary report and investigation of this particular botanical remains. She concluded that there is large amount of wheat grains and wheat shafts in the area. And the Halfa Medicago and all those botanical remains that she's playing with right now, her report is going to be fantastic because she's making comparison between the botanical remains we found and what was found in the embalming cachette in KV 63 in the Valley of the Kings. She saw that there is similarities between what we have in terms of packing and stuffing material and what was found in the embalming cachette KV 63 in the Valley of the Kings. Now, and the other thing, those material were not really worth anything in terms of economy and not even have any ritual purposes or medical purposes. They were just for stuffing, and there's parallels that we can compare. So the bottommost stratum of this particular shaft showed at the end a number of limestones that were looking like they're thrown down the shaft, and they are on top of potsherds, broken potsherds. After removing this area, this particular stratum, we found an area that is about 2 meters by 2 meters and about 1 meter thick of smashed pottery, completely smashed, thrown in, and stones would be thrown on top of this one. Some of the vessels we found are measuring cups made of marl clay, and some of these red bowls, as you can see. But the pattern that you're seeing right here is those stones right on top of these vessels. And the stones, those blocks, all of them have remains of mortar on them. That means they were used as building material and they were part of a construction and then dismantled then put back into this shaft on top of them. And inside this particular strata of the potsherd, broken potsherds, we were able to collect, not find, collect through sifting, bones of another dog. So we have 2 burials now, 2 dog burials in this area. Once we cleaned it up, we have a large room that is 11 meters by 5 meters. And forgive me for using this metric system, so that's why I have a photograph of my surveyor, Ahmed Ragab, just as a scale to give you an impression how big this room is. But what is on top of this chamber is that particular gallery that is running above us. Those galleries are Dynasty II galleries. Saqqara has 2 major networks of underground galleries that were used by kings of Dynasty II. The first one by King Ninetcher to the south of the causeway of King Unas, and it goes south all the way to where the Dutch concession, the New Kingdom Cemetery is. And even the New Kingdom people were using these galleries for burial as well. And the other network starts at the northern eastern corner of Unas, and it belongs to King Khasakhamwi. And apparently, it goes south as well, and it turns a little bit west toward where we are working right this minute. So Dynasty 26 clearly had a knowledge as to the location of these network underground galleries, and they used them as well. Same thing happened with Padinisit here. In the eastern side of this room, you have a large ledge that occupies the entire eastern side of the room. And this is the northern side of this ledge, and above you can see that underground gallery of Dynasty II just flying over our head. It was scary to work in this room. And the southern end of that particular ledge right here, we have a large vessel. I'm going to go call it, for now, a storage vessel. We cleaned it up, and this is how it looks like. It's in the corner, and there is a wall around it. The very existence of this vessel inside this large underground room, it tells me that this is an indication of certain human activities happening here. If it is a storage vessel or anything else, and anything else going to be explained shortly. So human activities happening here that has to do possibly with rituals related to the packing material, the vessels we found, the embalming material we found. So the corpus of the pottery we found inside the shaft and inside this room as well is this large number of cooking ware. Some of them were not used in burning, but the rest have this evidence of burning on them. An amphora that is used only for netron, and some foreign vessels with foreign oil as well. Red bowls, and those measuring cups. Those measuring cups were for oil. Because we're very lucky, we got measuring cups with labels written in hieratic. All of them have hieratic labels on them. And just wait on this one. This one says meh 4, which means fourth. Fourth what? Fourth day? Fourth time? But it's fourth, that's the same cup. Fourth of the oil twat. And the twat is one of the sacred 7 oils that is used in the embalming and during the ritual of opening of the mouth. So we always knew there is an oil, it's called twat. And we always knew it was used in the embalming and the opening of the mouth ritual. But what was this oil? To the point that we don't know. To the point that translation was support oil. We don't know the chemical composition. Now we can do context analysis and actually residue analysis for this. And for that particular purpose, since regulations in Egypt says there is no sample outside of Egypt, I had to look for a good chemist in Egypt. And I found 1, actually 3, working for the National Research Lab or Center in Egypt. And those are academic who don't have to teach, they only do research. He had his PhD in chemistry from the United States. So we will be doing residue analysis, and hopefully we can now say what is the chemical composition of the tuat oil that is used in the embalming process and in the opening of the mouth ritual. Another thing with these measuring cups that we have, we can also tell the volume. If this is the fourth day, okay, now we know it's to use the fourth day. It's the fourth time of using the tuat, so we can pretty much talk about the economics of embalming. How much money should be put in there? So the other cup right here, it talks about wet tep S. Some cups talks about embalming her head. Other cups talk about embalming his head. It looks like there is two people that had been embalmed inside this embalming workshop. We know the man. Do we have a lady with some distinction that is buried in the area and we don't have her tomb yet? This is something to look for. The other red bowls, some of them have the word simi, and simi is pretty much buttermilk, and then the word NTU, which is a myrrh. Both were embalming substance as well. So we are working toward, okay, mummification here. Some of the measuring cups have the word head and then passage for smelting. So we have to do this. And more of the bowls, red bowls with labels. I forgot to tell you that from those particular sherds, we have 335 sherds with labels. So now we can really do some good study on the material that is used in embalming and also do residue analysis to know exactly what these material are. Our pottery corpus has been documented by Dr. Ashraf Sanusi, who was one of the leading pottery specialists in Egypt, pretty much one of the first Egyptian students to learn about pottery. His assistant is Gihad, and she is a very promising young woman who we are now talking, me and her, about giving her this corpus to be her dissertation topic, and we are talking about finding some advisors for her. And I'm sure that she will be doing a fantastic job with this corpus. So if we have inside this shaft material that talks about embalming, so where is that embalming place? So this shaft is pretty much the place where they dumped everything after the process. So where that embalming workshop has to be. We had to look above ground, and almost 1.5 centimeters, now 1.5 meter to the south of the shaft, we found indication of a structure, the first wall we have right here. And we were very lucky. We didn't have to think much, because inside this structure right here, we found one of the red bowls in situ that was already similar to the ones we found in the shaft. So the connection has been made already between these two. And we left it. The following season, we came to the site with the purpose of finishing excavating the embalming workshop. And here we have Warda Nagar. She is inspector from Karnak, and she's fantastic, but we're gonna lose her this season because she went to France to have an MA, and we're happy for her, but sad that she's not gonna be joining us this season. What she discovered here is this mud brick structure. It's in rectilinear form, and surrounding this area, which is a basin cut into the floor, the bedrock, for a depth of about 1.5 meter. And on the other side, from top, we found this ramp that is mud brick ramp right here, dividing up a rectangular area into 2 equal spaces. From that side to this wall, 4 meters exact. And from this side to this wall, 4 meters exact. And we have this basin right here, and an indication of another rectilinear structure similar to this one, but the floor is not cut, okay? And this is very important. What did we find inside this structure? We found that particular context, and yes, again, Warda is excavating this site, and we have 2 jars. With the content of this jar, it's packing material that is soiled linen, and also botanical remains. And Izzat is one of the conservators that was working also from Saqqara. A wonderful young man, fantastic conservator, putting together this vessel. And who would appreciate this vessel more than Salima Ikram? She came and we looked at the drippings on the walls of the vessel and the inside. This is tar, and the tar is a basic embalming ingredient in Dynasty 26. We were always happy to take a little chip and light it up and smell this tar. So if there is burning happening, we have 2 3-legged braziers. We found them inside this pottery cachet that was also used for the smelting purposes. And some of the objects we found in the embalming workshop above ground is this very indicative Dynasty 26 beer jars and torches. We have 4 torches collected from both the embalming workshop above ground and the shaft where they dumped everything in there. 4 is a very good number. 4 for the torches. Those are the 4 torches used in the embalming during the embalming process. And some other thing we found is in that corner right here, we still haven't excavated the southern end of this embalming workshop. We found in that particular area here a statuette of a baboon, and it's been documented by Muhammad Rifat, also one of the people who worked with me in the Ministry of Antiquities. He now failed and went to the University of Asyut. I told him not to, but he went there. So this particular statuette is for a baboon, and it does have remains of and residue of some burning or dirt from the oils. So we need to also do some residue analysis and see what is in there. So finally, the area that we're excavating above ground, as you can see, the rectangular area with that very important ramp in the middle dividing up the space. Do we have any evidence that the embalming or purification tent looked like? Yes. In the Old Kingdom, Egyptians were very keen to represent the embalming or the purification tent, embalming and purification tent. And it looks like in this tomb, Pepiang from Mayer, that he has 2 doorways and some post holes that's holding up these poles to hold the curtain, and in the middle, that particular structure that is dividing up the space, and then there is a basin right here. So far, we're very close to this particular model or design of a workshop, of an embalming workshop or a purification tent. From all the designs of this purification tent from the Old Kingdom, it looks like the common denominator is that T-shaped form with this particular ramp in the middle. We have it in our embalming workshop, as you can see. And I think this is the first monumental structure as an indication of an embalming workshop or purification tent to be established on top in the cemetery right next to the tomb. So, is that common? Yes. There are textual evidence that talks about the king donating an embalming or a purification ibu tent to the deceased, and being an order for it to be established or constructed right next to the tomb. And this example comes from the tomb of Washptah in Abu Sir. And other people compared that particular purification tent to the Valley of the Kings, to the Valley Temple of the Kings. And Dr. Bravarsky here knows more than anybody about the purification tent, and I'm looking forward to his questions after this talk. So there is one thing left in terms of my interpretation. That big jar down in the bottom, what was it doing there? Well, In the embalming process, some paraphernalia were used, and those are vessels. Some of these vessels, particularly that one right here, it's called sinew vessel. And it's a red one, a large one. So this is what I have, the sinew vessel in a larger scale. So the use of the sinew vessel, Dawson was talking about the process of salt bath. The salt bath during the embalming process, he said, the deceased is not really being submerged completely in a salt bath. Rather, the Egyptian used vessels to put the deceased inside, and the head is not submerged in the salt bath. Is there any pictorial indication for that process? Yes. From the New Kingdom, we have always this representation of the deceased sitting on top of a vessel, a sinew vessel, like the one we have at the bottom, and there is lustration happening here. Is this water salt water? Closer example, a closer look at this particular scene. You see the deceased sitting on top of that large vessel. Another one is like this one. So I think the vessel I have down there is where the process of salt bath or salt bathing is taking place down in the bottom. But this is not the only function, the only ritual that happened down in the bottom. I think there is more. The wrapping process possibly happened in the dark in this area. So to go back to Padinisit, the guy we came to Saqqara in the first place. His text is polychrome, beautifully decorated, had suffered a lot through the time because of tourism effect, rise of humidity. So there is flaking of the colors and fading of the colors as well. So we had to do some conservation project. But to give you an indication of the text that is there, the text in this burial chamber is exactly the same text that is being used during the process of embalming. The offering text, the presentation of the oils, the presentation of the linens, this is all text that is partially used in the embalming process and also leading to the resurrection of the deceased and turning the deceased into a spirit, an spirit, not just a spirit, but equipped spirit. And some of the text giving protection, and also the royal regalia text that, as I said, was influenced heavily by the job of Padinisit being the priest of the mace head of the king. And as you can see, more series of resurrection texts, and then serpent spells this protection. The southern wall of Padinisit has a selection of coffin text spells that particularly opens the gate of the tomb, or the doors of the tomb, and letting the deceased go out, giving him free movement and allowing him to reach an area where all these northern stars will be existing, because he's going to turn to one of them. And right here on the door jambs, there is a ferryman spell where the deceased has to talk to a ferryman to take the boat and cross to the other world. And as I said, one of the things that we had to do is documenting the text of Padinisit. So we use computer-based hieroglyphic program that is JSH to transcribe all the hieroglyphs. And since this tomb is painted, the hieroglyphs are all painted, we needed to pay attention to color recording, because this is something people really don't pay attention to. We needed to record the colors before we intervene in terms of conservation and let our conservators work. So I had an idea, how do you do color recording, guys? We sat together and we said we generate a color recording sheet where we have the transcription that is computer-based hieroglyphs and our column numbers, and then the words will be all the individual hieroglyphic signs. We use coloring pencils like children, but we have to, and then we render the remains of the color in every sign. And after that, we name the color as we see it. Then we have to code it. And we use the Munsell color rock, not the soil. Rock, because Egyptian colors are minerals. They're coming from minerals, and the rock, the Mansour rock, is the best one we can use. So we code the tones before the intervention of the excavators. Once they're done, we're going to repeat that process again to know the actual color that we see after cleaning up. Digital epigraphy. Major goal of our work is to produce exact facsimiles of these texts for so many reasons. And we use, of course, digital technique that was pretty much introduced to Egyptology and promoted and theorized by Peter Millian. He said, we have to do it this way, and this is the good one. And I think every single mission right now is using this technique. First, I have our chief epigrapher was trained. He's from Cairo University. He's a teaching assistant at Cairo University, and he was trained at the University of Tübingen. Another person from Cairo University as well, is teaching assistant, is also, she's a woman, and she was trained also in Tübingen with us, in addition to another person who was Mohammed Rehan, who is in Germany right now doing his PhD in University of Munich. And this is also the southern wall, the very round of digital epigraphy that we have. The sarcophagus of Padinisit also has its share of attention in terms of documentation. Our photographer is Ahmed Ihab from the Documentation Center. He's worked with me as well. Fantastic, very, very artistic. He studied photography in a School of Art in Cairo University, and he has his team right now producing a documentation, a photographic documentation photos set, and also photographs for 3D modeling. Photographic 3D modeling. They were causing a scene at Cairo University, the Egyptian Museum. This is the scene of the tomb of Padinisit in 2010. Our conservation project, we had to talk about what is the problems to assess the situation. Major problem was humidity. We had to do some sort of a ventilation system that slowly and gradually brings humidity down. And we did not want to expose the limestone to the shock of change of climate all of a sudden, because that will bring more salt outside of the limestone. The salt is a main component of the limestone, so you don't want it to be coming out all the time. So gradual ventilation would help stabilize the salt inside the stone and not coming out, bringing the inscription, the reliefs with it out. Our conservators are from Giza, from Saqqara, and from Sharqiya. Those are also Ministry of Antiquities conservators. As you can see, Ahmed Imam is from Sharqiya, and we had to develop a strategy. And we say, the best intervention is the least intervention. So our first step is to clean the background of all the hieroglyphs, because this is dirt accumulated on the walls because of humidity, dust, and tourism as well. So we started working with that. It gave us a very good results that we started to see the colors in the scene. And this is the northern wall. I wanted to show you when we started working. This is some of the areas we experimented. And all of a sudden, here's some of the results we're getting with our conservators. Our chief conservator is Osama Saber from Saqqara as well. And this is a scene of the northern wall. Once we conducted only one step, which is cleaning the background of the hieroglyphs. This season, we were going to be facing the biggest challenge, which is dealing with the color. Our team now will do the testing and the X-ray that is needed to know exactly the chemical compositions and the binding substance of all this color, starting actually in 2 weeks. We're going back to Cairo, to Saqqara, to do our conservation project and finish the documentation of these scenes and production of the facsimile. This is some of the colors. It's polychrome tomb, and I think it deserves that we pay attention to these colors, because at the end, we're going to do digital restoration of these colors when we finish our facsimile. Last season was our third season. After 3 seasons, this is how our site looked like, with the underground burial chambers of Chani Hibu, Psamtik, and Padinisit. And the main shaft of Padinisit, and it turns out that so far, the main shaft of Psamtik and Chani Hibu is just one single shaft. And this is a big surprise for me and for everybody else, I think, who knows these tombs from before. And then comes in this area, this is the underground mummification tomb, and this the mummification room, and this is the shaft that we worked on, our Ibu tent, or purification mummification structure, and more embalming installation behind Psamtik and Chani Hibu. We're not going to get to this one right now because this will take so much time to talk about it. And this is how exactly our last survey map looks like. We're going to do this season laser scanning of the shafts, the underground galleries, the burial chambers, the embalming installation, above ground and underground. And our laser scanning professor is Matthias Lung from the E-Science Center of Tübingen. Is coming with two graduate students from his program, and we'll be forming a workshop for laser scanning and photogrammetry on the site for inspectors from Saqqara and also from some of my team members as well. All this work cannot be done without those fantastic people. Very dedicated, very devoted to what they do, and the example is very clear with Reisner Foreman. But if anybody gets credit for this work, would be this large number of team. We started 6 people in the first team in the first season. Now we're over 35 individual. This season we have about 5 new members are joining us. But please, I would like to read the names out loud. Dr. Ashraf Sinusi, Dr. Minna Duri, Muhammad Rifat, Muhammad Rehan, Hassan Zayat, Warda Nagar, Ahmed Ragab, Nadir Al-Hassanin, Shayma Muhammad, Rasha Hassanin, Gihad, Isam, Osama, Ahmed, Izzat, Hassan, Ahmed, Muhammad, Nagah, Wissam, Ahmed, Muhammad, Basim. And then the inspectors from Saqqara, Ba'id, Omar, Samir, Isam, Ala, Naveen, Maisa. Maisa actually will be joining us. She was assistant inspector last season. We liked her dedication and devotion, and she wants to learn. Said, okay, why don't you join us next season? And then Dr. Noha Abulela, Hani, and Sarah, those 3 joined us first season, and then we're not fortunate to have them anymore. Thank you very much.